Big time main event coming up this weekend. We have one of the all-time greatest bantamweight fighters, the Dominator, Dominick Cruz, WEC champ, UFC champ, legend, commentator, and a guy who had his way with his words against Cody Garbrandt. He's taking on Chito Marlon Vera, a guy who's absolutely on an incredible roll. And if you look at it for Vera, win over Davey Grant, win over Frankie Edgar, win over Rob Font, looking to put another great on the mantelpiece is Chito Vera, a guy who's really coming into his own. I mean, a guy who, I don't know, I could say, I haven't dusted off the record collection in a while, but why don't we do it, Matt? I mean, this is something that the Fight Night Picks fans, they absolutely love. Like 1983's Huey Lewis and the New Sport.
What about it?
What about it? I mean, listen, you do look at that album and you look at a couple of different movies and you have a little bit of fun. And while their early work was a little bit too new wave for me, they really settled into their own. And that's how I look at Marlon Vera. I mean, this is a guy that came into the UFC at a very, very young age, off the Ultimate Fighter. And if you look at the progression that he's been able to make, I mentioned that Davey Grant fight that he had, his third to last fight. Did he beat Davey Grant the first time he fought him?
No.
No, he didn't. So he had to really kind of grind his teeth, fight on the undercards, fight in some big opportunities, and obviously he does go out there, he beats Sean O'Malley, he fights Jose Aldo, he loses that fight.
Fought John Lineker before that, though.
I know, I understand that, but his big launch board, his big springboard for a lot of the fans was that Sean O'Malley fight. For the hardcores, John Lineker fights, so on and so forth. Marlon Vera's been around for a really long time. Andre Ewell's another big win that he had. Frankie Saenz, Guido Canetti, Luigi Boren, who we never see anymore. But when we do look at Marlon Vera, I think it is right to say, this guy's really coming into his own at 29, and he has a giant opportunity in another main event slot to beat another legend to possibly prop himself up into title contention.
He definitely does. That's the great thing about Marlon Vera. The only reason I brought up the John Lineker fight was because if you have been watching Marlon Vera, he's had multiple promotional pushes to where not all of them have really paid off, but he has been able to rebuild himself and be really good. Because that's the thing, even if you're a casual fan, you knew who Marlon Vera was before he fought Douglas Silva de Andrade, before he fought John Lineker. He was an extremely pushed fighter before he had those two losses. The problem was, when you lose to two guys, well, one guy, John Lineker, being one of the best fighters in the division, didn't put up much of a fight, and that one was on the defensive a lot and ate a lot of body shots against Lineker. And then he had a bit of a stale performance against Andrade, so a lot of people were left kind of wondering, okay, where does this guy fit in the whole division? But in the back of my mind, I was like, damn, I hope Marlon Vera goes on a run, because I really liked what I had seen out of him in his earlier run in the UFC, and you can see sort of the bare bones of his game and how they've evolved over time. He was someone who really had to use his Muay Thai, really had to use his kicks. Even think of the Brad Pickett fight. Like, Brad Pickett was up 2 rounds to nothing on Marlon Vera.
Like Chuck Mindenhall.
But the difference was, Brad Pickett just got head kicked in the 3rd round, and Marlon Vera felt terrible about it. It's a weird fight to watch. Marlon Vera hits him with a head kick and does like the whole Lyoto Machida bow and like cries afterwards because he felt bad. My point being is that Marlon Vera has been that guy for a very long time. Basically, like the famous Steve Jobs quote is, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to iterate as fast as possible. And for Marlon Vera, he kind of exemplifies that. You don't have to be perfect. Just fix yourself over time. Be a little bit different over time. And that's what I really liked out of Vera, especially on this run. Even look back at the Frankie Edgar fight. I think we both may have had Frankie Edgar. I know for a fact I thought Frankie Edgar was going to beat Marlon Vera.
No, you had Marlon Vera and I had Frankie Edgar, and I thought Frankie Edgar looked all right until the 3rd round.
I had Frankie Edgar, so we must have both had him in that fight, because I also thought Frankie Edgar looked really good. But the thing is, Marlon Vera doesn't look like he hits hard, but I'm here to tell you right now he hits pretty darn hard at this division, and that's always kind of been the weird thing about Vera. He is a volume-oriented striker. I would probably put him into that pool, but he's not someone you can mess around with, even with the 1 strikes here or there, because Rob Font's... Is Rob Font in his prime anymore? I would say in golf terms, he's probably on like the 15th, 16th hole. Like, he's been in a lot of tough fights at this stage of his career. A little bit older in his career too. But when that fight got past the 2nd round and Rob Font started to teeter off even a little bit with his output, Marlon Vera smelt blood like a great white in the water. It was impressive stuff to see Vera completely turn up the pace on him and really not let him go once he was able to turn the pace up. And the thing that I've watched a lot in Dominick Cruz, especially his last few fights, have been, hey, he looks really good to start out, gets a really big lead on his opponent, and then he'll just kind of coast, if you will.
And you would give me flack. I mean,
because you didn't say it in the right way one time.
Shut the fuck up. I watched a lot of tape on Dominick Cruz. If you watch him in the 1st round, it's the same damn thing every 1st round. Figure eight, pitter patter, let's get at her, Leonard Kenny, and he's landing a lot of volume. 2nd round, slows down with the feet, picks up the volume. Third round, he's already picked you apart. He just continues to do more of the same.
But we've seen Dominick Cruz in a lot of 5-round fights, and in round 4 and 5, he relies a lot on his wrestling and a lot on his footwork again. So I don't think it's a matter of him getting tired in fights. He just fights in a different manner.
And we've seen him in these 3-round fights. I mean, Casey Kenny fight, wins by split decision, beats Pedro Munoz his last time out. I mean, hell, Pedro nearly finished him. I mean, Dominick Cruz was given every opportunity to get back into that fight because they didn't want a redo of Keith Peterson V1. So Cruz gets the opportunity, rallies back, and then he's able to mount that volume and do his thing. And when you watch these Dominick Cruz fights, he was known for so long as Dominick Cruz the wrestler. Dominick Cruz the volume guy. And if you look at it, gotten away from the wrestling a little bit as his career has progressed. But when you look at it in a fight like this for Cruz, if I'm Cruz, I look at that fight that Jose Aldo had against Marlon Vera and go, geez, maybe I dust off those wrestling shoes.
I don't think he can recreate that at all at this stage of his career. The problem with Dominick Cruz is, I think the lack of wrestling is more come down to his opponents and not the fact that he can't do it anymore. Like, what are you going to gain in wrestling Casey Kenny? A lot of 50-50 exchanges where you both got tired from it? What are you going to gain from grappling Pedro Munoz? You're way faster than him on the feet. He's one of the most deadly jiu-jitsu aces in the division. Like, if there were any two fighters, Dominick Cruz, I want to call him DC so much, but any two fights that Dominick Cruz wouldn't wrestle in, it would probably be the last two opponents. I do expect him to wrestle a lot more in this matchup, but the problem is, Cruz has these very unique wrestling entries where he does rely on sort of that half-moon movement to then enter into his wrestling just entries. And the problem is, Dominick Cruz does really rely on his opponents tiring down in fights for him to then pick off. It's like, I've never run a marathon. I used to cross country when I was younger. But what they always told me when I was in middle school, early high school was, hey, if you meet a guy when you're running, sprint past him as fast as you can. Don't give them a single second in their mind to think they can catch you once they catch up to you. And that's what Dominick Cruz does. The second he gets an inch on you, he takes a mile. But the issue is, against a guy like Casey Kenny, who tired against Nathaniel Wood, you can do stuff like that. Pedro Munoz is 40,000 years old in MMA years, and he's almost 40 in the bantamweight division.
Got eye poked.
He does.
The young Punisher.
He did get eye poked. But the thing is, Pedro Munoz is someone who's as cold as molasses on a winter's day, and you knew that Dominick Cruz would be able to outspeed him if he didn't get knocked out, which is basically exactly what happened. Marlon Vera is as fast as a fighter can be at this weight division. He's not somebody who waits a lot for his opponent to really get started before he starts his own attack. And I don't think Vera's the type of fighter who's going to drop off a cliff at a certain point in this fight. And that's why I do think the output of Marlon Vera is such an X factor.
Yeah, I love the output of Marlon Vera. The one thing that I don't love is there's times where he gets taken down and he can think of himself as a Swiss Army knife off his back. And he is good with his submissions off his back. But you can't play off your back against Dominick Cruz. I mean, Cruz is definitely going to be more of a position over submission over finish type of fighter. Exactly. We do know this out of Dominick Cruz. The blueprint is there. But for Marlon Vera, he can spend long amounts of time off his back and not work to get back up because he's so confident in his ground game. The other thing about Dominick Cruz and his takedowns, he is obviously very unique on his entries. You hit it about the half beat thing. And the thing that I found interesting doing my tape study for this card was the fact that I can't remember for the life of me the fight I was watching. It might have been, I want to say it was Clark against William Knight, and Dominick Cruz said, oh, geez, he made a big mistake right there on his wrestling entry. He went same side with both things, head on one side.
Didn't need that way.
Went head on one side, right side attack, this and that. And if you look at it, I mean, I think back to you play rugby. All same side, head tucked in, this and that. Well, I'm not going to get guillotined playing rugby, so I don't have to worry about it. But of course, in MMA, you do. When you watch Dominick Cruz with his entries, they are so tricky, but you always do worry about the kicks of Marlon Vera, the knees of Marlon Vera, the submissions of Marlon Vera on those attempts, especially as the fight goes on. Because if we've seen anything from Marlon Vera, the thing that he proved to me in the Rob Font fight was, well, guy's not going away round 4, round 5. He's still there for these fights, still throwing with volume, still throwing with power. So I am really eager to see this. The other thing I want to say, this Dominick Cruz, slowing down. The Casey Kenny fight, maybe in the 3rd round. The fight against Pedro Munoz, 3-round fight again. So we get an opportunity to see an all-timer at bantamweight in a situation where he's very familiar with these 5-round fights, of course. But I look at it, Matt, I'm going to throw it on over to the YouTube community tab because you folks get your chance, get your say, get your day in the sun. Yes, Matt?
I just want to say one last thing about Dominick Cruz and his overall career. He's 37 years old, but he has had a lot of time off due to injuries. You can look at that in two different ways. He hasn't taken a lot of hits to the head, which is pretty good if you're 37 years old, but the mobility has been lacking as of late. I have a friend named Leah who just got her ACL repaired yesterday, so shout out Leah, hopefully you're doing better. But, it does affect you. She told me before she got got the surgery done that when it was cold, she could, like, feel her knee ache. Now, she's not a world-class athlete, but my point is, for Dominick Cruz to be at 37 years old, in a division that we normally worry about guys when they're 37 years old, I really do worry about him finally facing a top-tier contender after all this time off, because for Cruz, you can beat Kenny, you can beat Pedro Munoz, but neither one of those guys were seen at the points when he fought them as future title challengers. I think there's a very real world where Marlon Vera can beat Dominick Cruz. Maybe he fights the winner of, isn't Song Yadong fighting Corey Sandhagen?
Yeah.
Perhaps fights the winner of that matchup, and let's be honest, like, Marlon Vera could win that fight. He had a close fight with Song Yadong. That'll be a good fight. Like, there's a world where Marlon Vera could fight for a title, and I never once saw Casey Kenny or the Pedro Munoz who fought Dominick Cruz in that light.
I did Fundy National Park today. Took a trail I had no business being on that was all uphill incline. It was ridiculous. The point I'm getting at is...
like Dominick Cruz.
3 years ago, I tore my knee up, and motherfucker, it fucking hurt quite badly.
What did you tear, though?
Everything. You bend it backwards. My knee now, 2-3 times a week, bends backwards on its own, just taking a misstep. So it's just bad stuff altogether. But Matt, we threw it out there in the YouTube community tab. 1,000 total votes, 67% taking Marlon Vera to get the win, the 33% taking Dominick Cruz. I read your comments. A lot of mean things said about Dominick Cruz. So Bill is saying, I have to pick Chito in this one. Cruz is going to look better technically, but I think Vera's going to have bigger moments when he does land. It's hard to tell if Cruz is still at championship level at this point in his career. Derek saying, Dominick Cruz only lost in title fights. I have Cruz outworking Vera over 5 rounds. Good point there. First Last saying, Cruz is extremely patient, and in a 5-round fight, I can see him frustrating Vera with his pace and his movement. Regardless of Chito hurting him badly, I see Cruz potentially reading the defensive lull of Vera that Marlon uses to explode and counter to set up awkward combos and takedowns against Chito. Gas, I don't know, man. I can see Cruz being clever and outpointing Vera. Pretty sure he watched Vera fought and has learned a lot from that. And I'll go with one more.
What did he learn? Don't get hit at all for 25 minutes or it's going to be bad?
Orthodox saying Cruz better fight better than he commentates, LOL. And Forward Moving saying Cruz is too old and slow to hang with Chito. His chin can't take the power either. Forward says very mean things in the comment section every week. Forward, just do the damn thing, Matt. Topology, very similar. 72% of the fans going with Vera. We have more votes in the community tab. The odds in this one, Vera open to -155, -208. Cruz open +135, +170 now. So Matt, the fans have Vera. The odds suggest Vera is the pick Vera.
Dominick Cruz got dropped by a jab against a 40-year-old.
Yeah, I can't forget about that one.
Exactly. And I know that's a blanket statement to where it's like, hey, it's Pedro Munoz. He's a good fighter. He has good power. But Marlon Vera does not get tired in 5-round fights. There's a lot of evidence to point to that, too. If anything, he gets stronger in 5-round fights. And with Dominick Cruz, if the going's rough for him early on, I don't think he is going to be able to use his veteran guile to get through that in this matchup.
He did against Munoz, but he was given every opportunity.
And Pedro could be Marlon Vera's dad. He's that much older than him. Like, Marlon Vera right now is in his prime. Dominick Cruz hasn't really fought
Imagine a night out with Chito and the Young Punisher. Just a dangerous crew.
Dominick Cruz has not fought a top contender in their prime since Cody Garbrandt. That was UFC 207. That was a long time ago, guys. Like, he's not the same fighter he used to be. We used to talk about Cynthia Calvillo as a potential top contender all the way back then, too. And Cynthia Calvillo is not really known as, like, a top-tier fighter. I know Dominick Cruz was on such a high pedestal that, hey, even if you get knocked down from being MVP, you're still an all-star. And that's how I look at Dominick Cruz. But Marlon Vera, to me, is like Jimmy Butler, to put into basketball references. He might not be as best as the absolute top tier, but he's going to make it grimy. He's going to make it tough. Anybody who's not of that upper echelon anymore is probably going to get beat by him, and that's why I like Marlon Vera.
Yeah, I like Marlon Vera. Again, it really is the combination of skills when you look at this matchup. A guy who does gain as those 5 rounds progress. And for Dominick Cruz, you get past the volume and the pitter-patter. We'll have to see how Vera's able to wear or at least deal with the threat of the wrestling, because against Jose Aldo, that was such a big-time issue. Now, that was a 3-round fight. This is a 5-round fight, so we'll see how it plays out. But that is always a question mark in the back of my mind. Jose Aldo's not somebody that's utilized wrestling, you know, especially on the large rise.
Never.
It's the knockouts, this and that. Lately, it's been the wrestling. But that's the thing. It really was a surprise for me to see Vera in those compromised positions where he was just kind of helpless for minutes on end.
So last weekend we had said that, hey, if Terrence McKinney wins, I would expect a Paddy Pimblett call out. And guess what, Craig?
Yeah, look at that.
Guess who we called out right after? Do you think, I sort of set it up, do you think the winner of this will fight the winner of Corey Sandhagen and Song Yadong? I feel like Song Yadong and Marlon Vera, of course, have the history. They had a very close fight the first time around. Marlon Vera was all angry, he didn't get the decision. But the fact that both guys have been able to work their way to the top of the division, I think would make a very compelling fight and a very fun title eliminator for them. So do you think that that is the probable matchup for both?
Or you go the winner, Piotr Jan and Sean O'Malley, and then you rematch Vera with O'Malley if they happen to win, you know, because that one's contentious. But there's a lot of moving pieces, obviously, at the top half of the bantamweight division. A lot of fights that are already booked. A lot of fighters that, well, they don't have to wait and look in. So in this one, both of us going with Marlon Vera to get the win. We have Dana White's Contender Series breakdowns, previews here on the channel. One pick a piece. It's a totally different show than anything that you're used to. We get the opportunity to just hop in through that chat. We went live on Sunday night a little bit earlier. It's probably going to be another Sunday night next week. I know it is. And we have some big time fights coming up this weekend. Question mark kicks 2 hours before the prelims. If anything funky happens on Friday or throughout the week, we get the opportunity to have hindsight in the rearview mirror and possibly change some of those picks. That is the show 2 hours before the prelims. Matt, some big time fights coming up this week.
I'm really excited for this card. I know we talk about often about how
we talked ourselves into it.
But exactly, there's normally a lot of cards where you're like, hey, the only ranked opponents or the only ranked fighters in the main event, co-main event, and that happens to be the case this weekend other than Angela Hill. But still, for the most part, this is a very top-heavy card, but I do feel like we've been able to dig deep enough to really find some intriguing matchups on this card.
Should be a lot of fun. I hope you certainly enjoyed the show. The likes, the super chats, the subs every week. We wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for you, so thank you so much for your support. I really mean that. Everybody says it. I mean it. Trust me. But
you guys are the best community out there, and it's not even close.
It really is. That comment section is popping every single week. So listen, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. As we always say,
let's get into it.